Are you ready to learn exactly how to play the Italian opening from the very beginning to the very end? And starting today, once you finish this video, start winning a huge number of games with white? So now sit back, put this video on the TV, on the computer, wherever you feel most comfortable. Because I was debating whether to make this a paid video in the Academy or release it for free here on YouTube. So if you're watching it, it's because I've decided to release it for free for all of you. So leave a big like and let's get down to business. Chess teacher, what is the Italian opening? Saint, starting from the basics, the Italian opening, friends, is one of the most played openings in the history of chess. After the double king's pawn, we'll start with knight f3 attacking this pawn. They'll have to defend it with knight c6, and then we'll play bishop c4. These three moves, e4, knight f3, and c4, bishop c4, are the Italian opening. And this opening conceals some truly remarkable and strategic plans that, if your opponent doesn't understand exactly how to counter them properly, you're going to end up securing a victory on a great many occasions, even very quickly. In this video, I'm going to cover all the opponent's responses, or at least I'll try. Why? Because that way, when you finish watching it, you'll be able to play against anyone, since you'll be well prepared. Alright, here are typical responses from our opponent. Well, for example, the most typical one, bishop c5. And I'm going to suggest a very interesting move, which is c3, perhaps one of the main ones in this opening. Why? Because it already poses serious threats, both the d4 advance and the b4 advance. That is, if our opponent now decides to ignore the threat and plays a move like, I don't know, absurd, like, I don't know, b6, d6, even h6, to prevent us from jumping with our knight to g5, right? This scares many beginners, that we jump with the knight to g5 to come and attack f7, and for example, they play h6. Here we could already win directly, huh? In several ways, we could even win with d4, or, a bit stronger, I like it a little more, b4. In such a way that now we're threatening the bishop, and when it moves, we're going to threaten the knight as well. That is, for example, bishop b6, and we'll keep pressing the pawn. You see, it went first to b4 and now to b5, from where it's threatening this knight that has to retreat. Of course, if it goes backwards, well, we simply win this pawn. They were afraid of the threat, and now it's being even stronger because it can't be stopped. You see it, right? For example, if they play d5, we can capture. If they take with the knight, well, we have the typical sacrifice. And now the queen comes in, and this game is completely won. That's why here, they can no longer retreat the knight backwards. You see? But of course, they can retreat it to the side while counterattacking our bishop. However, here we also have a winning plan anyway. It's the following. Bishop takes f7. Spectacular bishop sacrifice. Why? Because now we're drawing the king out. Trying to wait, no, it doesn't have any good result for black because we can keep pressing with the knight. The bishop remains defended. We're already up 2 pawns, and against practically any move, we're gonna win the game. For example, here we already have this check, and I take the rook, right? This would be spectacular. That's why they have to capture this bishop, and, well, then we'll continue capturing the pawn with check. If they pull back, we'll enter with the queen. If they try to capture this knight, well, likewise, we can enter with the queen on h5, threatening to come to f7. If they try to stop it, then we can play d4, threatening d5. We have a completely stellar position. If they try to attack our queen, we can afford to enter and sacrifice the knight, since we can start giving checks with the pawns and they'll end up being checkmate. For example, here d3 with the bishop, the king has to move, but we can simply keep pressing with rook f1. We're going to go all in. And you can see for yourselves that this king has no escape. That's why, at this point, when we play c3 at the beginning, okay, they must be very careful, and a move that's useless, like h6, could be in this case, but for example, another one too, b6, well, it would already give us a decisive advantage. Remember, b4 threatening the bishop. Now it can't retreat here, but for example, it can retreat backwards. Let's see what happens if they try to defend this pawn with everything. Well, absolutely nothing happens. We can continue the game, either with castling or even pressing with d4, as I like, and black is going to have an extremely hard time continuing, no matter how much they exchange. Look at this. We keep pressing with the 2 central pawns. They can't develop because then the fork would come. Even instead of capturing this pawn, we can afford the luxury of continuing to advance. We can even afford the luxury of castling. A line that I really like is this one. Look, castling. We assume they can't play knight f6, because then we'd be winning a piece, no matter how much. Look, no matter how much they have two pieces threatening here, we have the rook ready to join the attack and we'd win the pinned piece. Therefore, let's assume the knight comes to e7, and then we can continue with knight g5. This plan appears a lot, as you can see. The good thing about this video is that you'll see so many ideas that you don't need to memorize them all, friends. Just keep watching this video as many times as you need, keep the ideas in mind, and then in your games they'll occur to you, because you'll have seen them in this video. In this case, how do they defend this boy? Well, it seems that with castling they've already saved themselves, but here the queen would enter, attacking checkmate on h7, attacking the f7 point with 3 pieces. As you can see, they're in a very, very bad spot. Primarily, they must defend against checkmate, for example with h6. And then, well, for example, knight takes f7, rook takes f7, bishop takes f7. And this game already has a material advantage. And not only that, but at some point we can sacrifice our bishop for h6. And the game would be completely won by checkmate. In this case, this would already be checkmate. As you can see, the Italian is dangerous. Mind you, if black plays well, then we'll have to concentrate a little bit more. But it's absolutely fine, because the plans are extremely simple. And that's what we like, right? Simple. I have acquired the digital board today, as you can see in this video, as an exception, okay? Normally, on this channel, we use the physical board. However, today I preferred to use this board because it allows me to move forward and backward more easily, and we can see many other variations, okay? Let me know in the comments what you think of these types of videos, and if you want me to do it with more openings. Very well. At this point then, as you know, we're seeing what happens when they make the most popular move of all, which is bishop c5. We're going to play c3, threatening both d4 and b4. Very well. What should they do? Well, then black must start to propose. If they stay still, with any move, we've seen that we have a very active plan. So they must propose, for example, with knight f6. It's the only correct move in the position. d6 is also interesting, right? Stay more passive. But a little trick I'm going to give you when black doesn't propose threats is to go directly on the attack. And in this case, the move d4 is the one chosen. We're already putting pressure on this bishop, which is a little exposed on the c5 square. If they capture this pawn, which is what they should do, okay, because otherwise we'll be left with 2 Buddha center, then we recapture with the c-pawn. And although we're leaving a strong diagonal for the check, which is what they're going to do, we simply cover with the knight, and we have a movie-like position, a spectacular center. Our 2 knights well developed. This bishop is pinning a knight, but it's not really doing it because on the next move I'm going to castle. And you're not going to do anything to me either because this knight will no longer be pinned. And then you're still far from castling because you have to develop your other knight. When you develop it, I'm already going to castle. Obviously, I must castle because you're threatening knight takes e4 and this knight on c3 is pinned, therefore I'm going to castle. And now, well, we have a game that's too comfortable, excuse me. For example, this pin would already be a small mistake because it's not threatening us with anything at all, right? This pin, it's true that it's being dangerous, but this is the good thing about this opening, that these pins aren't dangerous at all, because we don't even need to defend against them, right? With the preemptive h3. We can keep attacking, for example, with knight d5, putting pressure on this knight, not just pressing this knight, but adding more fuel to the fire, we also pressure this bishop on b5. We're temporarily giving away this pawn, which is inedible. You can use this in many variations, because if they take this pawn, we'll simply place the rook on e1 at some point. Careful, not right now, because of this bishop, but we'll put the rook on e1 and win the pinned knight. For example, how? We take the bishop, and now rook e1, or even queen e1, which I like better, because I'm attacking this knight and I'm attacking this other knight. In other words, as you can see, we have extremely dangerous lines. We have a very devastating attack if our opponent, for example, here, stays passive with d6, right? Remember, huh? d6, then we'll play d4. What if they don't capture and keep playing, for example, knight f6? Well then, obviously, they'll lose the bishop. So what happens if they withdraw the bishop? Which is another option, right? It's either capture or move the bishop back, otherwise we're going to capture it. What if they move the bishop back? We keep pressing, we capture on e5. What would you do? Well, the best option is to capture on e5, okay? And I'm going to explain why. Obviously, if they capture with the pawn, we can start by capturing the queen, and you'll tell me, let's see, chess teacher, if we capture the queen, aren't we going to be left a bit with an endgame where we're not getting much of an advantage? No, careful, because capturing the queen means forcing black to lose a pawn, either this one or this one. Why? Because the king is defending the f7 pawn and the knight the e5 pawn. In other words, if they capture with the knight, I capture here. If they capture with the king, I capture here. So, what's happening here? That if you play bishop b6, I'm already going to win a pawn from you. Many of you will say, hey, let's see, chess teacher, what are you telling me? If here I simply capture with the knight and you don't win any pawn anymore. Why? Because after the exchanges, now in the queen trade, you don't have the knight to capture. Yes, but the thing is, the knight can no longer recapture, therefore you're forced to capture with the king, and then I capture your f7 pawn. That's simple, simple. So this d6 line already ends up losing a pawn. Look what a calm line, right? Well, it ends up losing a pawn if he withdraws the bishop, huh? So they'll have to forcibly capture this pawn, and, for example, come to this check line that we've already seen leaves us with a quite interesting advantage, right? For example, here we castle, a pin over here. We've seen it was fruitless because we could continue with knight d5 with strong expectations. If they castle, which seems to be the best, we can equally continue with knight d5 attacking here, Obviously, it's better to withdraw this bishop, but the thing is, in this line, when you withdraw this bishop, I can indeed put you in a very interesting pin, right? Because now this knight is being attacked in several ways, and you don't really have a strong way to continue here. For example, h6, I continue with knight takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, the rook has to move, and here there's even a very nice move, which is knight g5. This move, obviously, if you haven't studied it, wouldn't even cross your mind. I studied this line because it's very interesting, isn't it? I find it very interesting. Knight g5. Why are we giving away the bishop? Because then we have this bishop takes f7. It's a line you have to study. It's impossible to think of it during a game, but I'm showing it to you because it's very interesting in case you find yourself in this situation, and then the king would be completely trapped. If he moves over here, we win the queen. See that? Then the king, for example, has to move back, and then this would be checkmate in two. Check, and then mate. And if the king comes forward, then d5, the king has to go out in the open, as I like to say, and then bishop g7, for example, right? And the king is going to end up getting checkmated, for example, with this move. Queen 3. We're seeing that this Italian is truly strong, but of course we haven't seen the main line yet, which is this knight f6. This is the main line. Why? Because they're directly proposing an attack on the d4 square. So far, we've been seeing how to punish if our opponent didn't react well to this c3 move. That is, if he plays d6, if he plays b6, if he plays h6, even if he plays knight e7, it would allow us to keep pressing. But what happens if they pose a serious threat, like, for example, threatening this pawn? Are we going to defend it, chess teacher? No, no. We're going to continue with d4, okay? Pay attention here, because this is what they'll play against you the most, okay? This is what they'll play against you the most. Bishop to c5 and knight to f6. So we're going to play with d4. It's that simple, forcing our opponent to take the pawn. What I like about this opening is that our opponent is forced to do what we want. If they don't, they'll be in a very bad spot. For example, what happens if they don't take and, for example, withdraw the bishop? Well then, we'll win a pawn. It's that simple, right? Why? Because this pawn was doubly attacked, therefore they absolutely must take. Bishop d6 doesn't work because then this position is indeed really dangerous. And here, there's a move that you should study, okay? Because it's a winning move, which is bishop d5. Wait, chess teacher, you're going completely crazy. What are you doing with bishop d5? Well, if you don't do anything, what I'm going to do is capture here and win a piece. See that? I eliminate the defender of the e5 square, and then, well, I take here and win a piece. But of course, obviously, you're not just going to do nothing, but rather, for example, you'll take the bishop. But then I'm going to attack this knight, and when it moves, then I'll win the pawn. And as you can see, this position is extremely dangerous for black and completely losing. The bishop has to move away, right? This position is completely winning, for example, with the padlock technique, which I uploaded to the Academy, a full class on the padlock technique, which, you can try for 7 days for €1 or $1. I'll leave it down here in the description. And the padlock technique is nothing more and nothing less than locking in our opponents so they can't do absolutely anything. This position is completely winning. He has to move with the king. I don't think anyone would like to have this position with the black pieces. Watch out, I'm trapping your queen if it weren't for f6. And you're going to end up in a very, very bad position. So we're realizing that here, when we play d4, they absolutely must capture. In other words, we're in the most typical line of all, the one you'll face most often, and we see they can only capture, because if they don't capture, they're going to lose. Question: chess teacher, aren't they giving away this pawn? Yes, obviously they can't take it right away because they lose the bishop, right? So first they must exchange. What will we capture with? With this one, with that one? We'll advance the pawn to e5. What do you think is most effective? Well, here you have two options, and both are very interesting. Obviously, there's also an interesting option, which is to start kicking out this bishop, but we'll focus on two, capturing here or advancing. My favorite is to advance. I repeat, for anyone who's lost, Italian opening, bishop c5, the most played move of all, and against c3, knight f6, the most played move of all. We play d4. They must capture, because if not, they're lost. And when they capture, we'll advance to e5. Why? Because we're attacking this knight. Good. Why is this line my favorite? Because either they know the line by heart, or they'll have lost again. The only move that maintains equality, d5. The only one. If they move the knight away, they're already lost, and the vast majority of opponents will move the knight because we're attacking it, okay? Now let's see how to continue if they play d5, because it's not very difficult either. If they move the knight away, for example, backwards, right? Let's start with this one, because it's really bad. Simply, we castle, for example, we don't even need to capture, because we're in a completely winning line. They can't stop these attacks. You see it, right? Bishop takes. It's practically impossible for them to defend with such poor development. What if they come, for example, forward? Well, a simple move, like bishop d5 again, would win this knight. Hey, chess teacher, this knight can't go anywhere. No, nowhere. They might try here, which is what they'll do. I assure you they'll do this. Try to sacrifice the knight on f2, because there's no other way, see? Here it's lost. At least they try to come and capture f2 to set up discovered attacks, but this is fruitless because we capture with the king, and when they capture on c3, simply pay attention to this move you must memorize, we'll bring the king out to g3. This is impressive. It looks like a very strange move, but it's actually the best one. Why? Because the knight covers all the checks and the queen can't get in. The king is completely safe on g3, and so they can't do anything. We're left in a position with an extra knight. They actually have compensation because they have some pawns, but not enough to balance out this development we have, right? Look, this knight, this bishop, which are like two knives, castling here would already be dangerous because we'll simply keep developing our pieces. We'll come in with the queen and we'll come in with the rooks. And this game is completely easy to win. Why? Because they can't attack this king in any way. He's safe here. If you're too scared, you tuck him away. It's that simple. So I'm going to go back a little bit. Remember well, okay? I'll repeat so we remember the lines. We're playing d4. They're forced to exchange, and we play e5. Only move that saves it, d5. We've seen that going backwards is a disaster. Coming to e4 loses the day. And coming to g4, well, obviously it's very dangerous too, because this knight is going to be very poorly placed. We simply capture on d4. Look at this, how interesting. We capture on d4, threatening the bishop on d5, which, it's true, has a check. Ah, interesting. Look at this, huh? What's the best move here for black? This is very interesting. Sacrificing the knight. This is the best move. Why? Because here there are some theoretical lines with d5 that are also losing for black, but they offer a certain dynamism. Imagine what they have to hold on to, grasping at straws. That the best move is to sacrifice a knight already says a lot in our favor, right? Who's gonna sacrifice a knight here on d4? No one, right? What are we doing, huh? We threaten the knight, it has to retreat, we capture here. What's the most human thing? Without a doubt, moving this bishop away. Where? Well, it could be by giving check. What are we gonna do? Well, the same as before, when they gave us this check, we cover with the knight, we get into a fruitless pin because we're gonna castle and it won't be pinned anymore, and the threats are so many that black won't be able to do anything. h3, threatening the knight, and when it moves away, we capture right here. We double the pawns, we can even try to come in with queen d2, and this position is completely terrifying for black. Yes or no? No one would like it. That's why we're not interested in coming here with black either. Therefore, friends, and I'll review again so it's very clear, we play c3. The most played move for black is knight f6, and we put in d4. Only move to not lose, capture. And we play this with. The only move to not lose, d5. Any other move, let's say with the knight, loses. But chess teacher, what if they play d5? What do I do? Sure, it's fine if they play poorly. I'll win because I've seen this video and I know what to do. But what if they play well and make the right move? d5, a good move. Even so, we're in a completely equal position. It's not in our interest to capture here, it's not, because then black would go for an option, which is this one here, placing the rook. This happened to me in a game. The most loyal followers of the channel will know. It wasn't exactly this line, it was similar, but I captured on g7 and opened the line for the rook, and when I castled, I was really under attack, right? On this flank, I managed to win with a huge blow, but I was really poorly positioned. That's why here, after d5, the correct move, we shouldn't capture, but instead we should play bishop d5. Simple, right? They make the right move, bishop b5. This is the good one. Let's review up to this point, because it's very simple. The other order also exists, you know? It's the same thing. Knight f6 attacking this point, playing c3. It's true that here the move knight takes e4 exists. Very interesting, which we'll cover now, but if they play bishop c5, we'd be in the same order, right? If they play bishop c5 first, c3, and now knight f6, very well. Let's play d4. The only good move? Capture. The best move now is d5. Bishop b5. You can watch the video as many times as you need. Above all, friends, save it well. YouTube gives you the way, the option to save this video down here so you don't lose it. I advise all of those who want to start playing this opening to save this video and watch it several times so that it sticks in your head, because there are many moves, okay? Very well, bishop b5. We're in a completely equal position, where here the best option for black is to play this knight e4, and we'll simply recover here. We're in a very equal, very interesting position where they're putting a lot of pressure on us. Now, I don't advise playing knight c3 because it's being heavily attacked, but rather bishop d2. No matter how much they exchange, we're left in a very interesting position, right? A position where we have a pawn chain with central dominance. They'll have to castle, but we're also in a very good position to launch an attack at some point with the knight and also with the queen. Even this bishop can be recycled to d3 to come and threaten the castled king. Since no knight can come to defend this position, we're really left with some completely fascinating lines of attack, okay? This is the best option for black. Very well. Chess teacher, if when playing the Italian opening they don't play bishop c5 and they play knight f6 first, what do I do? Can I play this c3? Well, you can play it, but be careful, it's dangerous, okay? It's a dangerous line. If you want to play this line, you can play it. Look, I'll show it to you. Knight takes pawn, you're going to castle, and here they'll play d5. This is the correct move. And then when they play this d5, we'll trade here. We're putting pressure over here. We're putting pressure over here. They can probably defend against everything, okay? It's a delicate line. Yeah, if black plays well, they might end up with an advantage, but it's playable, it's aggressive. Now then, is this the line I recommend? Look, no, I recommend a quiet line with d3. If they attack this point, I recommend making a slow attack. First, I defend the pawn, and now then, whatever they do, then I'll play c3. And I'm in the same variation as before, but with a slightly slower game. I can play d4 at some point. Huh? I can castle first, for example. I'll give you a simple example, right? If they castle, I'm gonna castle too. My idea is very logical, right? Typical of the Giuoco Piano, which is the setup here, placing the rook on e1, moving the knight through this flank, eventually placing it on f5 in Kasparov's office, and carrying out a gradual crushing attack on the king side. Example. Come on, I'll give you an example. Black plays d5, and I'm going to play, well, rook e1. For what? To move my little knight. Okay? For example, they come to pin us. I don't care. For example, I play h3. If you move away, I'm not going to play a g4 either, as it seems too bold to me, right? Because there would be very interesting lines with knight takes g4, then they'd also come in with the queen, and this seems dangerous to me, but knight d2 works. With what idea? Well, with the simple idea, for example, of moving the knight through here against any move, for example, bishop a7, this is thematic. And now I come through here. Why? Because I'm threatening the bishop and I have two very well-placed knights. I threaten bishop g5, a strong pin that can be pressured in several ways. For example, we can come with this pawn, we can come through here. Now that they don't have the pawn advanced to g5, if, for example, they prevent it, we'd simply be winning the game already, putting pressure on this pin. As you can see, it's a calmer game, but it's a very interesting game that, if you want, we can make a second video to simply explain this style of play. But I'm not going to focus much here because it's a very intuitive game, and it's a very simple game to play, right? Rook e1, we'll move the knight through here, right? Sorry, not through here, but through here. We'll come with the bishop to g5, for example, to make this pin, and we'll be left with an extremely comfortable game. At some point, we can break, moving, of course, the king first with f4 and f5, breaking and coming in with the rook, right? And we have a very interesting and, well, super strong game. What happens if instead of playing either bishop c5 or knight f6, they play passively with bishop e7? Then we go all in, d4. What happens if they capture, which is what they should do? Well, we're in a very interesting line where I recommend giving away this c3 pawn in the style of the Scotch Gambit, and now we can move the queen to b3, okay? The idea of playing the c3 is to be able to move the queen along this diagonal, whether they capture or not. They must stop it with knight to h6, and it's useless because we eliminate it and enter through here. Staying passive might not be the best option for black with a bishop to e7. As you can see, the Italian opening is an extremely strong opening, an extremely successful opening if we understand the ideas well. In this video, I think the ideas come across very well. I don't want to make it any longer because otherwise I'm going to get bored. I prefer to keep it concise, short, so you can watch it as many times as you need. I recommend that you watch it several times. If you want to take a step further than just a simple opening, I definitely strongly recommend that you join the channel's official academy, where you have everything available to study the middle game, end games, strategy, and tactics. You have weekly classes, several weekly classes from FIDE Masters and myself that are super interesting, and you can join now if you want to try it for 7 days for just €1 or $1, depending on where you're from. Simple. You join, try it out, study the classes, and you'll see that you'll love them, both mine and Flavia's. Flavia is a FIDE master who explains wonderfully. She's a pro. I'm completely sure that you're going to be fascinated. I strongly recommend that you try it out down here in the description, okay? Click the link and join the academy, and if you become a student, you'll be able to talk to me and I'll help you. For example, to build an opening repertoire, I'll help you with how to study, everything you need. You'll be in touch with me if you're a student. The most expensive price the Academy has if you stay as a student, the most expensive it gets is €19 a month or $24 a month. This is the most expensive the Academy gets, imagine that, and you have access to absolutely everything, including even the ChessMine app, which is the best app for studying chess. So I hope you loved it. I'll be waiting for you down here in the academy, and we'll see each other tomorrow. As always, friends, in the next video. Leave me something in the comments. I'll be reading them. Goodbye.